Usually our morning begins with a very energetic President Ryan, but he's sick today, so I will give you what I can muster at this late stage in pregnancy. So welcome. Really glad you guys are all here today. We have a great program. We have Jeff Cyphers here. We've got Don Mills recording, so be sure to scan the QR code on your tables so you can access this video and or the slides for today and share them with whoever needs to know this information. We've got a lot of sustaining sponsors today, so I want to say if you are one of these members, thank you. The reason we are able to have these conversations is because members like you, and everyone else who's doing this today, thank you. We have 50 years at Sonoma County Alliance, and in that time we've held a really active environmental and water committee, and many of those members were actually a part of the founding of Sonoma Clean Power. So I want to give a quick shout out to our board members and presidents or committee chairs, Dick Dowd and Martha Zoyland, for consistently keeping us abreast of what's happening in water and energy and environment. As businesses, that directly impacts this bottom line, right? How we get our energy and how much it costs, how sustainable it is. This is conversations we should all be a part of and be partners in looking at our immediate energy supply. So thanks for being here and being a part of that conversation. Hopefully we can lean in today, learn more about all that's been accomplished in the last 10 years of Sonoma Clean Power, and help participate in what's to come in the next 10 years. So thank you for that. And I will get us through this agenda rather quickly. So again, please make sure to watch your slides on the QR code back there if you can't see them, and share them out as needed with colleagues. We're going to do some self-introductions. So as I come to your table, just stand up. You're going to give your business name or your name. And if you are a guest, we have beer here to get us through the 7 a.m. meeting. So give me a card and we'll do a raffle at the end. So we're going to start over here with this group. Just stand up and I'll pass them out.
All your leads exchange day for past questions. Home Depot one more.
Curtis Curtis, I'm broker and CEO of Curtis Realty.
John Anderson with Anderson Architecture Center.
Randy Brown, Exchange Bank.
Howard Dalton with Exchange Bank, which is consultant.
Scott Kincaid, Facility Development Company. Jeff Cyphers, with San Jose Season.
Chris County with Center of Sea Life House.
Good morning, Nicolette Weinstein, Northwest Building Exchange. Lisa Whitby Shacker, Northwest Building Exchange.
Denise Joaquin with Sonoma County Builders. Melissa Galliani, Waikato Radio.
Sherry Granzano, Bob Fresh, Latino.
Good morning, Paul Schwartz, Colton Icon Properties, Commercial Real Estate.
Brett Willis with Study Point Rockaway, so Gravity Road.
Mark Soil and Toner Company, we are still as old as dirt.
Architecture, the big architecture and super service.
Dick Dowd, past president, and also co-chair of the Water Supply Committee for the Business Alliance. And in all honesty, I also have to tell everyone in this room that I've been on one or another of the commissions or committees for Sonoma Clean Power since its inception back just now over 10 years ago.
Kurt Nichols, retired past president.
Not very good.
Get us awards.
Dennis Wilkinson, semi-retired Dennis Wilkinson.
Stephen Jackson, retired.
Brandon Jewell, CD Foundation.
Juliana Graham, DCM.
Megan Rose, San Jose Junior College. I help employers create internships and hire students.
Steve Merle, with Friends
Mr. Smart.
Good morning, Simona Whitehead, Board of Bill Service, Illinois.
Terry Chambers, Exchange Bank.
Good morning, Russ Powell, Leadership Development. Good morning, Arthur Cheney, retired from the City of Santa Rosa Police Department, retired from the City and County of San Francisco, current president of Roger Black, Sonoma County, Board of Check. And I love my guest here, my nephew, Mr. Emerson.
But no, my name is Thomas Anderson. I work for Arkansas Financial and
Dennis Letter, President Smart, and also on board.
Carl Service, TLC Media Architecture.
Good morning, everyone. Jen Wiltermude. I'm community liaison for schools in Sonoma County and Boulder County.
All right, and if you're a guest, give a card or something with your name on it, so we can see who was here.
Good morning, William Belcher, CC Engineering.
Good morning, Madeline Keegan O'Connell, WCA, Sonoma County.
Hi, John Ridley with Calpine Advisors, interested in the service I just offered.
Bill Bolster, Electrical Optical.
Good morning, Kevin Jones, Mass Line to Santa Rosa, and I have a guest with me, Rafik Abdu from Skyline Smart Energy.
Steve Listener Engineers.
Good morning, Janet Collar, Summit State Bank and past president.
Don Mills, Kuvare Brewery, proud donator of the Birdie Beer.
Good morning, Heather Thurber, Redwood Empire Realty, and President-elect of North Bay Association of Realtors. Margie Soyland, Soyland Management.
Good morning, my name is Melanie Stormy of Management Solutions, and I'm board member.
Quick Power Associates.
Morning, Jack Burns, Navigating.
Hi, Kevin Dugo, GFA Solutions.
Dan Rosacci with the Roundbar Group and Morgan Stanley.
Good morning, Ken Frankie, Architecture Development.
Rick Carlisle, staff engineers.
Tom Clever, Thunder Construction Company.
Good morning, Todd Mendoza, W Real Estate, and have a guest, Kevin Flaherty from W Commercial.
Joe Gaffney with St. Vincent Hall.
Mark Nelson, Inside Construction.
Good morning, Marcel Likeness with EC Engineering Group.
Andre Grant with Project Race Consulting.
Jody's Business, 707 Promotions.
Harry Davidian, Digital Sensing and Control. Justin Hunter, Poly Construction. Roy Martinez, Business Strategy Group.
Rob Sanville, KLH Consulting.
All right. Excuse card up here. And we've got Kevin. You was here today.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, I'm gonna get right to this program. So if you could join me. Since its formation in 2013, Jeff Cypress has served as CEO of Sonoma Power, a community-owned electric power provider serving Sonoma and Mendocino County. Under his leadership, SCP builds utility-scale wind, solar, and battery storage and is spearheading a regional effort to construct 600 milliwatts of new geothermal power. Jeff previously worked for 20 years with California's electric industry, administrating investor-owned utility commercial and industrial programs, designing microgrids, and constructing renewably powered homeless shelters, portable housing, libraries, and fire stations. So please help me welcome Jeff Cypress to the stage.
last meeting. So I want to give you a little bit of an update about what's been going on with Sonoma Clean Power, and then I do want to focus a bit on what's coming. I was given a great introduction, thank you, Beck. And instead of 600 milliwatts, it's going to be megawatts. Milliwatts would be a lot easier. I might be able to get that up this year. So we are your local power provider, and I'll talk about the difference between what we do and what PG&E does, because I think that's important. But we build big things. So this is one of our wind turbines up in Livermore. It was really fun to climb that tower, although it took me 45 minutes to climb water. Those are people down there, if you can see them. And the rotor hub is the size of a full-size city bus. That's the little part where the blades connect. And to give you a sense of this, one of these can power about 3,000 pumps. So these are big wind turbines. Here's some guys doing some wind tie downs while they're waiting. And this is what the field looks like out in Livermore. So for every one of the old turbines out in the Altamont Pass that we took down, actually for every 25 of those old turbines we took down, we put up one new one. And it makes about 3 times as much power. And so that is a good way to protect hops, because when there's just one rotor instead of hundreds, you can actually spare many of those hops lives. We also build really small things. So here in Sonoma County, we've got a number of small solar arrays up and operating. And we like to do that locally. Here in Catalona at the Labio Ranch, we're renting land from a local dairy that was struggling financially. And this gave them some income to stay on their land and produce some solar power for all of you. So we started our service in 2014 and dipped out. Thank you for actually being involved in 2011. You were there from the get-go. And we are a government entity. So we are managed by a board of directors of supervisors from 2 counties, Sonoma and Mendocino, and by the city council members from each of the cities we serve. We don't use tax dollars. In fact, we're not allowed to. We have to produce all our own revenues from our charges to customers. And really our purpose is to improve oversight. And I'll explain what that is. But it came out of a pretty devastating crisis in California. And when I talk about public safety on this slide, I'm talking about a lot of different kinds. We began with the public safety mission of cutting greenhouse gas emissions and trying to reduce the threat of severe storms and droughts. We are beginning to try and figure out how we can improve public safety in terms of lowering fire risk when it starts, in terms of reducing the number of ignitions of utility class fires and things like that. And then we're also helping with customer service and customers on their bills. So community choice is the category of power provider we are. And they came out of, so there's 24 of us in our agencies all around California. We're serving about 1/3 of all of California right now. So about 50 million Californians get power from a community choice power provider. And we only generate the power. We don't manage the poles, the wires, the substations, what you call the grid. That's PG&E. So PG&E still does all of that. And what we do is we run the power plants. So we contract with third parties to do that, like Calpine, thank you Calpine. They generate a lot of geothermal power, most of the geothermal power in this region. And we also go out and are beginning to build our own resources now. And so that shared partnership where PG&E does all of the consolidated billing to customers and we do the generation part, has been working really well, and so well that we're expecting a majority of California to actually be served by CCAs within about the next 4 years. So we're at 1/3 now, and it's growing quickly. So we also work with customers on all of the things that are related to electricity. So back in 2016, we identified that electric cars could become a pretty good way to help folks lower their total ownership cost of a car. So even though electric cars do have a higher price tag up front still, we're finding that over the lifespan of the car, they're significantly less expensive to own because of the lower maintenance costs and the lower fuel costs. And they also can be charged at times of day that provide huge benefits. So I'll mention one of those coming up. But we also work with nonprofits. So we've donated, I think it's 21 now, electric vehicles to nonprofits for their use. This lowers their operating costs, not just on purchase, but on operations. And we're really excited to continue that program. We work with kids in schools. So CTE Foundation, thank you for helping work with us and a lot of our local high schools to teach kids how to construct from scratch a street legal electric car in a semester and take it out on the road. This is a really fun program. We even got into electric bicycles. We wanted to get involved with transportation that wasn't cars as well. And we have, if you haven't been, have any of you been to the customer center on 4th Street, 741 4th Street? That's almost a half a month, that's amazing. So for anybody who hasn't been there, I recommend you check this out. So we don't only do cooking classes and things like that. We really help you figure out how to cut your bill. We offer free classes, and this is an event center that has a lot of space in it. About 100 and so people can have an event there. We have chambers of commerce events. We have real estate association events. We have all kinds of events. Your price of admission is that we get, it's kind of like a timeshare. We get to tell you a little bit about how to cut your bill and how to be energy efficient if you come there. So that's your price of admission. But I really encourage you to reach out to us and use that space. It's a community facility. So I want to quickly recap what people tell us. So I have captured the 4 primary things customers are concerned about when they think about, and I'm talking about business customers in our community, think about when they talk about electricity. And the first one is, my power bill is too high, of course. And so I want to show you a little bit about what we do about that. Since our portion of the bill for generation is only about 1/3 of your power bill, most of the costs of electricity have to do with the grid. Maintaining the wires, maintaining the poles, doing all that undergrounding work, all that expense is all on PG side. So we're 33% of the bill depending on what kind of customer you are. So when we cut our generation rates by, say, 25% relative to PG, that's roughly our discount, we're only saving you 5 to 7% on the total bill. So it's not that big a deal. So our real work is to make PG show their math when they ask for a rate increase. And so we're down at the California Public Utilities all the time, making PG show their math. Sometimes we find errors. In 2022, we found an epic error that saved about $120 million. And so that's important work. We also work with customers one-on-one, and they come in mostly to our center or call our 800 number. And we really talk with them about what would it take to lower your particular bill? And what's your circumstance? What kind of home do you live in? How old is it? What kind of appliances do you have? All those kinds of questions. If you're a business, do you have refrigeration? What's the age of that? Have you checked your compressors? Things like that. And I mentioned the free classes that are sent. The next thing customers talk about is that power shutoffs are hurting my business. So one of the things that we do is we go hunting. We go look for where on the grid you could invest a small amount of money as PG or another entity can make some repairs and cause a situation where power shutoffs are way less needed. And so we have one great success story so far, and we're working on another one. We found a 1/4 mile section of power lines, overhead lines, that if PG undergrounded them, Oakmont would not need to be shut off, and most of that portion of Northeast Santa Rosa would not need to be shut off for public safety power shutoffs. And we convinced PG to underground. And we're hunting for more of those situations because this kind of growth is not a sustainable work when we have so many frequent power shutoffs. And then we advocate for the highest value hardening. So when we talk about grid hardening, we're talking about putting insulators on the conductors so that if leaves blow against them or a squirrel builds a nest, it's not going to short out the power lines and cause a trip or fire. Or it's undergrounding Or it's even, in one case, a remote grid. So at Pepperwood Preserve, we worked in partnership with them to construct a 100% renewable remote power source. So there's no power lines running to one of the facilities at that preserve anymore. And so they eliminated all the fire threat in that region and ultimately eliminated the cost of maintaining those lines. So those are some examples of things that we do to reduce the threat of power failures. The third thing people say is it's hard to get a timely connection for my new home, my business, my charging station. Does this resonate? Okay. PG is a bit stuck right now because they did fall behind in maintaining the grid and keeping it ready to go. And then they got caught by rapidly changing climate conditions and orders by judges to do fire hardening. And so one of the first things we do is we make sure that senior people in PG know about your problem. So if you want to talk, like we can talk. Often, very often, the folks who are mid-level and junior, their automatic response is we can't connect. Or it's going to be 7 years, or it's going to be 2 years, or it's going to be some very long time period. If we escalate it, we can often resolve the issue. And so that's one of the services that we like to provide to local businesses. So if you're having trouble, come talk to me. And we want to see if there's a way to escalate that matter. And sometimes a call from the senator isn't a bad idea. They actually, everybody on the ground, I gotta give PG credit for this. They do want to solve your problem. They're very frustrated by that, but sometimes their own internal rules get in the way. So sometimes we gotta love to skip out. We also are gathering all the grid data that we can possibly get our hands on and figuring out how do we actually inform folks ahead of time. So one of my goals in the next year is to be able to talk to organizations like Permits and say, we know, based on PG&E's own data, that these areas in this city are going to be very difficult to connect new load to without upgrades, and expensive upgrades, like $30 or $100 million upgrades. And so we want to get you to put PG&E on the record, or the PUC, or somebody, to start prioritizing projects because we see a hospital wants to go here, a grocery store wants to go here, and some low-income housing wants to go here. So get ahead of that cycle instead of find out after the fact. That's going to be tough to do because not all the data are easy to get and not all the data are reliable. But it's a goal of mine, and so we're gonna make it a strong effort on that front. And then we also do want to continue advocating for catching up. So the build out of the grid, starting in roughly 1950s, early 50s, with the Tennessee Valley Authority, the United States had an attitude that we're going to build grid capacity first, and the housing and the businesses will come and fill it up. Starting in the 1980s, the late 80s, early 90s, we stopped building the grid capacity. We just, as a nation, said this isn't that affordable. We can coast on the capacity we've got, the spare room on the wires. And this was worldwide. This isn't just the United States. There was a cost-cutting effort that started happening then. And now we're in the hole that we dug, because now we're finding that we're at the edge of those limits all over the place at the same time. So definitely want to catch up where it counts. Okay, the last one the customers say is, how do I get more value out of my rooftop solar? So does this resonate for anybody? Anyone have rooftop solar here? All right, this is more than average. All right, that's great. At least 20% of them. So a lot of what we work with is educating customers about how to get retail value out of your solar. Because if you're netting solar power onto the grid exactly when it's being produced, you're getting almost nothing. You're getting this de minimis, tiny little credit because the value of solar power at noon is increasingly approaching zero, or even a negative number. And so what we're learning is customers need to learn how to use the power exactly when they're making it. That's the first strategy. So if you have an electric car and you work at home occasionally, charge it between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. Stop charging it at night. You don't want to charge your car at night anymore. That was the old advice because it was cheaper at night. But nighttime power is primarily natural gas, and it's increasingly more expensive. And if you have solar, you want to use the power exactly when you're making it, because then PG doesn't even know you made it, we don't even know you made it, but you're getting 100% value for it. You're not paying anyone else to charge your car, you're paying yourself, right? So that's retail value. It doesn't just have to be a car. If you've got a newer dishwasher with a timer, and you're going to work, set your dishwasher to run while you're at work, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., that's the sweet spot. That's where year-round you're going to get good solar power production in that time period. If you can't do any of those things, you might want to explore a battery. A battery will allow you to fill up the battery in the middle of the day and then discharge it into the grid or your own use in the evening. And that could be valuable. That is a more expensive option because batteries aren't cheap yet. But those are some of the strategies we work with customers on. And then we're working on structural ways to bring value back to rooftop solar. So we're piloting programs to have workplace electric vehicle charging. So if you can charge your car at work during the middle of the day, you're actually not just lowering your price tag, you're not just lowering your greenhouse gas emissions. It's super convenient because, hey, you're at work, you're just plugging in. You're also increasing the value of everyone's rooftop solar in your region because they're now feeding your car instead of feeding Los Angeles or going all the way to Arizona. Sometimes California exports solar power to Arizona in the middle of the day. We have to pay them to take it. That's a terrible strategy. So you definitely want to improve on that. So I want to give a snapshot too, before we get into kind of where we're going, about California's power sources. So this is the whole state. This isn't some element there. And this is some small print, so I'll point some things out. So that big gray thing on the right, that's natural gas. So if you look at total power production in California, we are about 40% natural gas, a little higher. We're close to 10% nuclear power still because of Yellow Canyon. A little tiny bit of biomass at the top. Fair bit of wind, 7%. Solar has made an enormous cut out of fossil fuels. So solar power in California is increasingly growing. It's in the high 20s. Geothermal is an important power source here, and that slice is bigger than you might guess based on the very few geothermal projects in California. Does anybody know, one person can't answer this. Does anybody know what the largest geothermal power facility is in the world? Yes?
In the world.
In the world.
Indonesia.
Nope. Geysers. All right, so we are home, thank you, Caroline, to the largest geothermal facility in the world. And when we talk about, what are we at, 750 megawatts?
Calpine's about 725 megawatts.
Yeah, and then we've got
NCPA,
NCPA's got a few more.
Yeah.
So that facility, we talk about 700-ish, a little plus megawatts of power. That completely hides the reality. So if you were comparing that to solar, you would start by tripling that number because geothermal runs all the time, solar runs about a third of the time. But then you'd have to roughly double that value as a price because it's there all the time. So it's there during the 2-week period in the winter when it's dark. It's there in the period in the winter when the wind's not blowing. It's there when all the batteries are empty. So it is a resource that actually it has this critical value that's largely underappreciated by most folks. So hydropower is that darker blue. And so this is California's mix last year. And if you kind of look at it and squint, we're about 50% fossil and nuclear. And then the rest of it is some form of hydro or renewable power. Hydro is hugely variable in California, is my guess. If we have a drought, if we have a wet winter, it makes an enormous difference in how much hydro we have. So it's very difficult to plan your reliability around hydropower. So hydropower is really primarily a way that California reduces how much fuel we burn. But it's not a good strategy for keeping the lights on. So in comparison, again, sorry, these are smaller screens, so the print is small, but that purple large bar there is large hydropower. This is Clean Power's resources last year, or actually 2 years ago, because we have to report a little later. That gray section just to the left of the purple in our default service is called system power. What system power is if we didn't buy it from a specific supplier, then there's an organization called CAISO that fills in the gaps. And what they fill it in with is almost entirely natural gas. So when you look at that section, about 10% or so of our mix, that's natural gas. And we have the bluer line there, or the light aqua on the left, lower left, that's geothermal. We've got biomass and bio-waste on the left in yellow. We have solar power at the bottom in yellow, and then wind is that sort of turquoise color there. So our mix is about 90% renewable or hydropower. California doesn't like calling hydropower renewable. I think they just didn't want more large dams, but hydropower is renewable, so I just can't say that in any official capacity. The optional service we have, so that's what customers get if they don't tell us they want anything else. So the optional service, the local 24/7 service, we call that Evergreen. And that is primarily geothermal and local solar. And it is entirely produced inside Sonoma and Mendocino counties. And it must provide all of your power needs every second of the year without any reliance or any money going to natural gas power plants to back you up. This is unique in the United States. So far as we know, no other power provider is providing a real-time renewable service yet. We've been doing this since 2014 because we wanted to show California what it was going to take to achieve Senate Bill 100. Anyone heard of Senate Bill 100? 100% renewable goal by 2045. California has a mandate that all power providers reach 100% renewable by 2045. We're not going to succeed. I'm just going to tell you that. We're not even on track now. We can get there. It's not going to happen as a state by 2045, but it's going to take some big things. So we'll get to what those big things are. A history of cost savings. If a bar is above the line, that means we were more expensive than PG&E. If it's below the line, it means we were cheaper. So for the last 11 years, we've been cheaper 80% of the time. I'm proud of that. I'm not proud of the fact that we cannot guarantee cost savings. And that has a lot to do with the fact that regulations change frequently and energy markets sometimes move against us. So we make a strong effort to be cheaper and provide cost savings. We're learning, and it's no surprise that if going green costs more, you're going to get a lot fewer customers. If it costs less, we get almost everybody. So we have about 87% of all customers have stayed with us. We're optional. Customers can leave our service. You can decide to go back to PG for power generation. So that's unique among government agencies. I don't think there's any other type of government agency you get to opt out, like roads and property taxes. So that keeps us on our toes. So let's get to the future. The headline is California's path to 100% renewable is too expensive. I'm just going to say it. We are very rapidly moving in a direction where California is going to have a 100% renewable grid in mid-May at noon and in mid-October at noon. It's going to be 100% renewable. It's already there occasionally now. And it's going to be backed up by a 100% fossil grid that runs in the winter when it's dark and still, and the batteries are empty. And the Germans have a name for this. It's Dunkelflaute, dark still. And so that's expensive. You have two duplicate sets of power resources. I don't think any of us would have designed that, but that's where we're going. So I don't know if you know, but California has no plans to retire any more natural gas power plants or its last remaining nuclear plant at any time in the future. There are plans that say that they want to do that, but if you talk to anybody in the know, they're saying we have no way currently at any point in the future where we think we can shut any of those down. So what's happening is we have natural gas-fired power plants. One of them in Southern California ran for 80 hours last year. There are almost 9,000 hours in a year. It ran for 80 hours, 0.1% of the time. And it got paid more than it had ever been paid in any prior year because it has to be fully staffed, it has to be ready to run at a moment's notice, It has to have done all the maintenance work, and all we're not paying for is fuel. That's it, which is a very small fraction of the cost. And so we, even Sonoma Clean Power, are still paying natural gas-fired power plants more than ever to stand by and wait, just in case it's dark and still. So when I say this pathway is too expensive, we've got to put some alternatives on the table. And so far, California has only put one idea on the table, which is offshore wind. And we kind of know where that's going at the moment, given our federal situation. So we have this challenge. How do we provide clean, reliable, affordable energy every second of the year and shut down and stop paying duplicate resources? Because we can't afford duplicate resources, or at least we can't afford 100% duplicate resources. I'm agnostic about whether we keep a little bit of that fossil fuel around, just because it's that expensive to get rid of that last bit, but we're keeping all of it around. And that's not good business. So this brings us to geothermal. So I mentioned about its 24/7 nature, but I really want this to soak in a little bit. If you have a power plant that can run all the time, you can be filling batteries with it when you don't need it, and the batteries that the solar couldn't fill because it was dark that day, or the batteries that might be able to be filled twice in a 24-hour cycle instead of just once from solar. You can be using it. It's good for reliability. The state is beginning to recognize this. So we've been beating this drum now for 5 years, and the state has now ordered the construction of 2,000 megawatts of new geothermal power plants. So that's significantly more than double all of California's geothermal power. However, currently, more than 95% of that expected build out is currently forecast to be built in Utah, Colorado, and Nevada, not in California. So almost none of that is expected to be built in California. I'll get to why. It has nothing to do with our rock conditions and our, technology. You can guess it's maybe a little more political. So some of the newer technologies globally are now allowing us to use way less water than traditional geothermal, and much less land than traditional geothermal. And one of the things that's most exciting to me is you can also place it in more locations because it's not as dependent on that volcanic type of rock condition. And so I first want to give I'll get back to California in a second. So let me talk about the geothermal opportunity zone. So in Sonoma, Mendocino counties, working with Sonoma Power, we formed several years ago a geothermal opportunity zone here to begin to steer the direction of future geothermal development in this region. And we mentioned the goal is to build 600 megawatts of new resource that meets established community criteria. So we've been working over those years with community advocates, with folks who might be living near these facilities to help steer, like, what is it going to take to make this be responsible and work. And one of the things that was most exciting is about a year and a half into our project, the U.S. Department of Energy published a study that found, and this is independent of our work, it found that if you radically scaled up geothermal energy in the western United States, it would be 30% less expensive to reach 100% renewable goals than if you didn't. And that has everything to do with closing the other power plants and being able to not overbuild other resources. So if your batteries aren't going to be empty without geothermal, you have to massively overbuild solar and wind and other resources and batteries themselves to have larger storage capacity. So now I want to get to Calpine's facility. So up on the hill, how many of you have been up on the hill to the geysers? This is a good group, all right. If you haven't gone, look for an opportunity. It's extraordinary. This is a true gem that is hidden from most of us most of the time, but if you can get on a little shuttle and go take a Calpine tour, it's really cool. There are witches' cauldrons and boiling mud, and it's really fun. Yeah, it's right here. It's very close. As the crow flies, it's like right there. But it is an all-day tour because you gotta drive some windy roads. So this is one of Calpine's units that's up there, and their technology was really kind of invented in the 1950s and 60s, and it came out of some of the oil industry know-how. But they were able to figure out how to drill into a volcanic formation that had naturally fractured rock. It had a naturally occurring underground water basin, and it had a really hot rock close to the Earth's surface. And so those three conditions were necessary for what's called hydrothermal or kind of traditional geothermal power. And so they have injector wells now that inject fully treated wastewater. Thank you to Dad for being part of that project. And that allows them to recharge the basin and sustain the output so that you don't have a diminishing quantity of output over time. And so you have those injection wells in various places. You also have collector wells in various places, like steam coming out of the ground. And so this is very distinct from the technologies that are being developed now. And the reason is we don't have a whole lot more water. So when we expand geothermal, we're gonna have to do it with way less than we did in the past. And so we have to try and figure out these new technologies. So in Utah, there's a project, I apologize, I didn't realize the screens were so small, sorry. So on the left, I'll just talk about it. On the left in that graphic is a technology that is shorthanded EGS for Enhanced Geothermal Systems. And what folks figured out how to do after the fracking boom in the oil and gas industry was to take that technology that has a very shady kind of environmental reputation in many locations and to deploy it for way better use. So they figured out how to drill inexpensively a vertical well that injects water into the ground, and to drill another vertical well nearby called a collector. And then in between at the bottom, they use that oil and gas technology to crack the rock in between those two wells to cause the water to spread out through the hot rock and then get collected up as steam. At the surface, they're able to capture more or less all of that water, take the heat out of it, and re-inject all of it back into the ground. So it becomes almost a closed loop. There is a little bit of leak off that can happen in the ground. But what we're finding in Utah is that leak off is significantly less than 20% of the water flow, and in some cases, it's less than 1%. So we're able to greatly reduce the amount of water used. What's really cool about it is it doesn't have any of the environmental harm of the oil and gas fracking because lots of things. One is there's no additives to that water that aren't food-grade additives. The vertical wells are lined in steel, so there's no interaction with groundwater. The cracking process is looking for dry, hot rock. If you find hydrocarbons, you can't make geothermal power. It's going to destroy your system. So you don't have the fouling or the spoils at the surface or the collected kind of hydrocarbons that are coming out of the ground in an oil operation. And so what we're learning also is it reduces the risk of causing man-made earthquakes. So you can actually inject hotter water than you would if you were injecting, say, fully treated wastewater into the ground, which might be cool or at least air temperature. And so, and that hotter water is less likely to cause the rock to crack when it hits it. So, so there's a lot of advantages that they're learning about in Utah. And the first project of its type, it's about 500 megawatts of output, is now shipping almost 100% of that output to Southern California because California is willing to pay for it. And none of those jobs, none of those taxes went to California. It went to Utah because Utah gives you an expiration permit in 10 days. California takes 3 to 7 years. No one is currently serious about exploring for geothermal in California. We found that out because we signed partnership agreements with 3 companies, 3 really awesome companies who know exactly what they're doing. They've been out hunting for land. One of them did buy a parcel of land here in speculation. And all of this informed us, we're gonna wait a little while until California gets its act together and figures things out. The reality is, we need to change the law here in California. So here's Supervisors Gore and Hopkins on the right, out in Utah visiting. They're standing in front of an exploration well, which is the size, the pad is the size of a children's playpen. That's the backside. And they are proud of the fact that the federal government, under the Biden administration, streamlined the exploration process for geothermal and said that is going to be exempt from environmental review, but all production facilities are not. You must go through full environmental review to make power. But you can explore so long as you meet a very high environmental standard and limit your site footprint. You can explore for geothermal and figure out if there's an opportunity. So what we've got going in Sacramento now is AB 527 by patent that would shift California's process to, instead of doing 2 duplicate SEQA reviews. So right now, if you do geothermal in California, you have to do a SEQA review for exploration to find out if you have a project. That's 3 to 7 years. Then, once you find out you have a project, you have to do a SEQA review of the project at the same location. And that can take a number of years. So because that risk factor, basically people aren't looking at it. We want to look at this the same way the Biden administration figured it out. And the rationale for this is, out of the last 400 permits that were pulled nationally when they were reviewing this, the Biden administration, they found 0 instances where the review came back without a negative declaration. 0. So they figured out, wait a minute, we're just holding up progress at this point instead of actually identifying important environmental review. So applying that review once makes a lot of sense. Here's the bright spot. We are fully expecting Trump to support that exact same process. Here's the Venn diagram overlap between Biden and Trump is geothermal. That's the one thing that they agree on. Because it's renewable, but you gotta drill. So let's go with it. I'm okay with that. I mean, let's work together. So I want to encourage you to snap this at some point. It allows you to go to our GeoZone page. You can sign up for updates, all that kind of thing. But I did want to take plenty of time. How much time do we have? Yeah. Let's take some questions at this point and see what you guys think. Okay.
Yeah.
A little fireside chat.
Yeah.
We're very nimble.
Yeah. All right, thanks for that. All right, so kicking us off, what are some of the top 3 strategic priorities for the next 5 to 10 years, and how do those align with the economic development plan?
So the one I want to hit hardest is, I think California's been on track around both renewable energy and electric home appliances and electric vehicles. It's been very preachy. It's been you should, because it's the right thing to do. And I think it's time to retire the you should part and just make it economically the right thing to do. And so we're really, really focused on cost management and trying to encourage the rest of the power sector to follow us on that. And so that means like really tightening the belt on when undergrounding is necessary for fire protection. Where are you doing it? That matters. You don't do it in the easiest places. You don't do it there because that might not be high fire threat. So we're pushing back on some of that kind of work and saying, like, let's focus those dollars where they really matter and invest in that kind of places. So the first thing I'd say is cost. And the fact that if you have, here's the example that illustrates that. I was interviewing some folks from the Rural Electric Co-op Association. So I don't know if you know this, but most of America doesn't get its power from a CCA like us or an investor-owned utility like PG. Most of America gets its power from rural electric co-ops like there's like 4,000 of them in the United States. And I was asking one of them, are people buying heat pumps for their water heaters or electric cars? And he said, oh gosh, yes. And I said, how, why? He said, oh, it's way cheaper than natural gas and gasoline. And I was like, oh, what's your rates? Half of ours. So, anyone live in Healdsburg? Lucky. So Healdsburg has a municipal power provider whose rates are half of PG&E's. Half. And so it makes so much sense in Healdsburg to switch from natural gas to an electric heat pump for your home because you save money. It's not just the right thing to do, it's like the right thing to do for like every reason. So I think, let me just emphasize that one, we can go on to the next question.
All right. What infrastructure or policy changes are needed to support this wider adoption of geothermal energy in our region, and how can we participate?
So, you could go support AB 527 by Pavan, that would be awesome. Let me give you a quick snapshot into both how complex and how simple this solution is. We'll start with the complex part. In order for us to build new geothermal, say, northeast of Geyserville, between Geyserville and the Geysers complex, and ship it into Santa Rosa, we have to upgrade a power line near Bakersfield. Okay, that's how complex this is. Does that make any sense? Here's why. In California, and this is logical, in California, if you want full credit for the power you're making, you have to prove you can deliver it during these summer evening into downtown Los Angeles. And that's the state's reliability problem. The state's reliability problem is downtown San Diego, downtown Los Angeles, and the surrounding area. That's where, half of California lives south of Wilshire Boulevard. So we forget about that in Northern California. So you gotta get power into LA. That's weird, but there's also something like 1,700 other projects in the northern half of the state that are dependent on that same upgrade. So one of the things we're trying to do is say, wait a minute, what if we prioritize that particular upgrade between Bakersfield, it's not quite Fresno, but it's kind of west of Fresno. That line needs to get upgraded to support like almost anything in Northern California. So we're starting that advocacy, we're really ramping it up, and bills like AB 527 will help a lot in terms of getting developers back interested in California. We have the best hot rock in the United States, in California, by far. Like if you look at the map of technical potential for geothermal, California is off the charts good. And not just in the geysers area, we're actually looking outside, almost exclusively outside of the geysers footprint, but nearby in that kind of region. What's going on?
I got a hardball one for you.
Okay, bring it.
All right. So there's been some fiscal growth over the last 5 years for clean power. There have been chatters about ratepayers worried about funding non-essential programs or overhead. Can you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. So come to a meeting, bring your advocacy, right? So we meet in Santa Rosa. We make our decisions in plain language, unlike a California Public Utilities Commission, where you need a $600 an hour attorney to advocate for you. And our board is your officials, right? So if you've got opinions about where money should be going, bring it. So our program expenditures are around 1.5% or so of our budget. So that gives you a little bit of a taste of the amount we spend on them. It has been as high as 2%. That's our peak. And what that means on your bill is it's around 0.5% of your electric bill goes to programs. What we're proud of is we constantly throw out the programs that are not working that great. So we do start a lot of things at the end, and I'm proud of that because we're evidence-based. So if customers, here's one of the best examples, we talked about EVs earlier. In 2016 through 2018, we had a huge bulk discount on electric cars. That was early in the EV industry. So we wanted to juice the market. In the first year, we had about, it was about 400, 500 or so folks bought electric cars in our program. In the second year, it was 50% more than that. It was great. We were like, woohoo! And in the third year, it was exactly the same as the second year. So we ended the program. We're like, we're no longer moving the needle, so stop. Like, stop investing customer dollars into this effort. And that's an example of how we do try to keep innovating and changing the market like that. But again, if you've got a better idea of how to spend those dollars, come on in.
All right, and then can you walk us through some of the projected impacts of this long-term energy plan on commercial energy rates? Specifically, we're talking about geothermal. How that could impact us.
Yeah, so the biggest drivers of rates in the next 5 to 10 years are going to be made in the legislature and in regulatory bodies, not even here. So we'll get to the geothermal impact in a second. But the first thing is, there's still a raging debate right now about whether policy costs in California should stay on electric rates or should get shifted back to the general fund. So if you didn't know, the reason why so many things are added to electric bills in California is that if we put those costs on the general fund, they would often require a vote of the people or a 2/3 supermajority of the legislature to approve it. If you put the costs onto rates, it requires a simple majority and no vote of the people. Way easier. That's why everything's so expensive in California. So we were putting our costs onto rates, whereas most states don't. So there's a pretty radical idea right now that an LA Times reporter has pitched, that's circulating right now in Sacramento, which is, what if we shifted all the undergrounding and fire costs to the grid, which is going to be a significant price onto the general fund in bonds, which would actually lower the cost because we're no longer having a private company that's been bankrupt twice borrowing money. It's now the state of California. And it would also make it so that about 85% of Californians would see a huge reduction in total cost, and wealthy people would see an increase. So maybe there's an argument, because you would be paying for it through taxes rather than on your electric bill. That's radical. That's a serious proposal right now in Sacramento this year. I don't think it'll pass in the first time it's heard, because that's pretty radical. But it might eventually get through. There's other efforts to even lower the compensation for solar that could come back. Those are going to be the big price tag things I expect, as well as efforts to reduce the need for tree trimming. Tree trimming is about 15% of your total electric bill, so it's a huge cost in the system. So the impact of geothermal and adding that here now, we expect will be a significant price reduction on total costs over time, at least compared to what is currently mandated in California. If you just look at today's snapshot, adding geothermal probably lowers prices by 5 or maybe 6% relative to current costs. But if you followed the law in California and you built out the renewables to the California mandate, it's lowering it by about 30% over the next 2 decades. So geothermal is going to be a critical resource, and also sustaining the existing hydrogen operation is going to be a critical resource. So we got to keep that going too.
All right, I like this one. Can you give us an elevator pitch as to why we should all be on Stone Clean Power instead of PG&E?
Save money, cut emissions, invest locally. You know, we give back millions of dollars into our community every single year. When the Tubbs fire happened, we immediately donated $1 million to all the nonprofits working on it. We were out there, we were doing the watershed supervision because we had staff and we knew how to do that. You know, this is what you all do too, in your capacity. This is a community organization, and our board and our advisory committee and our staff are here. We're local, and we're trying to do good work here locally. I think the main distinction, and I mean, I've been a little bit cheeky about PG&E today, and they have wonderful people working for them. But what they can't do is they can't be local anymore. That's really their challenge. In the 1980s and before, they had a lot of local folks, but they have really centralized that corporation. And so when it comes to understanding cannabis or the wine industry or local water issues, they show up. But we're there every single day, and we're living in the same water basin, we're living in the same business climate. And I think that allows us to have a more hands-on kind of situation. It's additive. It's not that we're replacing PG&E at all. We're adding to what they can do and helping customers. So one of my favorite things is customers often call in and say, how do I believe what you're saying? And our operator will get PG&E on the line. We'll have a three-way call. And PG&E will say, yeah, it's true. And they're like, okay. So I love that because we're able to directly communicate with the customer and kind of address their concerns.
Yeah, we're gonna go after. All right, so this one ties into that one. A question on, is there a future possibility where PG&E is out of the equation? And then it's followed with please.
So I've had these same thoughts myself. I was only 6 years into my career when PG&E went bankrupt the first time. I was in court during that bankruptcy. I was in court every single day in the second bankruptcy as a petitioner. And I also have my concerns about let's just say the top 40 people in the organization PG&E are not my friends. I would say the linemen are, and a lot of people go front lines and call centers are doing great work. So I think when it comes to what's called municipalization, so this is a hostile takeover of a for-profit corporation by a government entity, there's a very high bar for pulling out. City of San Francisco is the furthest along in these times. And the last community that formed, I think, was Redding. I think that was the last community in California that was formed. If you didn't know, so not just Healdsburg, but in our service territory, Ukiah is another municipal entity. And they've been around for 80 to 100 years. So they formed in the heyday of municipal power. It's really difficult to form a municipal power entity in California because the for-profit companies have built firewalls to make it very, very hard. And it's okay that it's difficult because it shouldn't be that easy for a government to take over a for-profit corporation. That should be a matter that the people really are strongly behind. But it has become so difficult that it's probably a 3-decade process to pull it off. And so my view is the way that PG&E ultimately fails and is dissolved is a matter of their own making. If they need to go bankrupt a third time, that might be the condition where the people rise up. It's not going to be me. I can't do this. But if the people rise up and say, the first time we bailed you out, it was about $60 billion. The second time was closer to 40 to 50. That's a lot of money. And that money falls on taxpayers and ratepayers and to some extent shareholders, although the shareholders were not liquidated to zero. And that's very likely the conditions that will lead to that. And so I don't really want to go back for the third time. It's a very expensive proposition for everyone. And they do some things really well. And so I would much rather see them facing a governor who challenges them. Our governor does not. Our governor is the largest. They are the largest donor to counties. So Gavin Newsom is not going to challenge them. But a governor that does challenge them to shape up, or else, I think that's a better strat because I think they're capable, but I think they have to get pushed.
All right, last question before we pass it out to the crowd. What are some of the workforce development efforts that are in place to ensure that we have skilled laborers for this kind of work? I know you work with the SCA Foundation, but what other ones are in place so we can have people to work on these different projects?
That's an awesome question. So we start in grade school. Has anybody heard of the Zoom? The Zoom Academy? Oh, nobody's heard of that. All right. So about 5 parents and make power and lights up, and they learn about water conservation and all that. So we began in grade school, and we work our way up through the grades. And so we talked about career technical education and the skills training, but we also have scholarships. We work with Mendocino and San Jose Junior College. We have a scholarship at Snow State. We work with trades. We're really increasingly trying to work on feeding folks into apprenticeship programs and getting them into the skill trades. This is not a college-only pathway world. In fact, so much of what we do is dependent on building things and maintaining them. And I wish I had my ringer up here, Sean, who just gave a wonderful presentation to our board to enumerate the 25 other things we're doing. Those are the things that come to mind about that. And I guess we got some from that. Thank
So on a small local scale, when you add solar power, it takes 3 months, maybe more, for PG&E to approve to connect to. Is that something that you can monitor? Do you monitor it, and do you have the ability to pressure that, manage it down to where nothing to speed?
So, in very limited cases, we can get involved in a project. It's hard to get involved in very many because there are hundreds of simultaneous projects going on all the time. We have about 250 megawatts of rooftop solar in Sonoma County. So there's a lot of customer build out solar that's happening. What I'm trying to do is focus on the systemic problem because that's where I think having a handful of staff and dedicating a lot of time will be the most effective in the long run. But I feel your pain, and if you've got a particular situation, come talk to me, and there might be something we can do. The systemic solutions, though, are deep and complicated and have a lot to do with staffing levels in certain departments, with decision-making approvals, with insurance. So one of the problems we unpacked is that in order for PG&E to retain certain insurance premiums, they have to underutilize certain power lines so that they don't have thermal stress. Well, their engineers say they could use more of that power line, so they could connect things faster rather than making upgrades. But their insurance doesn't like that. So we're seeing an argument between insurance premiums and customers. That's interesting, because there's a right answer there somewhere. So we're trying to get regulators to intervene on that and figure out where is the right answer. Like let's scrutinize that and not let shareholders make that decision alone. Let's think about the public's interest. Because both things do matter. And then we're also looking at just the process. So if you go to Surprise Valley Electric, you don't know where that is, Bryan Valley's district, Northeast California. It's a co-op, and Surprise Valley Electric connects your solar. They have a same-day guarantee. So once your system's complete, as long as you call them with 5 hours left in the business day, they will connect you back. So that's a different service model. And very close second is SMUD, so the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, beloved by their customers, not just because of their low price, but because of their customer service. So they actually have a very strong connection for solar power as well. And what we really are hungry for is not so much trying to get PG&E to do the right thing, but trying to get the regulators, particularly the California Public Utilities Commission, to care about customers. That's a hard hill to climb. It's very difficult to get the regulators to care because they're answering to the governor and the lawmakers about things like keeping the lights on. And so that's not a customer thing. We're just trying to build a system that keeps the lights on, and it's trying to be more renewable. So that's an effort that we're taking on, but it probably requires building even more advocacy arms and more conversations with commissioners and lawmakers to pressure that. Because if the regulators don't care, then the for-profit corporation shouldn't care, according to the bylaws. Because, hey, we get to make profit without care. So I really place the lion's share of the blame on the regulators, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Former Catanian, how are you? Mark Sutherland, good to see you. I want to change the subject a little bit to biomass. Is that a bad word? Can we clean up biomass, and can we agree that we kind of have a forestation, California cleanup reality? And you mentioned that 15% of the cost in our bill is for tree management that PG&E is having subcontractors and so forth do. Talk to us a little bit about the biomass reality. Thank you.
Yeah. So, the only time the public called for my resignation was when I proposed some biomass as a discussion, not even a direct proposal. About 20 people showed up and they demanded that I be fired. It's a hot button issue for a few people, and there's a good reason for that. There are biomass plants that are profoundly polluting in the United States, even to this day, that have choked out communities with particulate emissions that have not been well regulated. That is not the case in California, and especially for new biomass plants. For existing biomass plants that are sort of legacy plants, there are still some air emissions that are higher than you would see at a new plant. But if you have to go through the California Air Resources Board for a permit on a new biomass plant, you're not going to see pollution at all coming out of that plant. You're not going to be allowed to, because the particulate standards are so tight now. And so my view of biomass is that it is very likely a good opportunity for where there is a particular flow of woody biomass, fuels, crop waste, whatever, that's already happening and that is inefficiently being dumped. So right now, the tree waste from PG&E is trucked to a biomass facility on the east side of the Central Valley, called Chinese Station, or all the way up to Humboldt County. So those are between 4 and 5 hour drives for those trucks. And we've got about 50 of those trucks a week driving all that distance back and forth. So road damage, diesel, all the rest. That's not an efficient solution. So there could be an environmental solution to that problem. The issue is there's not a whole lot of that, despite all the tree trimming, there's not a whole lot of that biomass when you talk about power production. So it would, if it ever happens here, it would be very small scale. And my guess is it would be a tribal tribe. My guess is that there are a number of tribes locally here who are interested in this as a means of business. And my hunch is that's the route we would go. But it would probably be on the scale of 2 to 5 megawatts or so. Probably not larger than that. Because as soon as you get into larger scales, you get into the need to produce your own biomass. And now you're growing. And now you're in monocropping and all those other issues that can have other impacts. So dairies are another source. They have animal waste that can be collected and harvested, and methane can be digested and can produce power. And one of the lovely things we have here in Sonoma County is we don't have a lot of concentrated ag or dairy operations that are large scale. And that's nice for our landscape and our environment, but it does mean we have limited power production opportunities here compared with the East Coast or the Midlands area. So where there's a lot more concentrated work.
One of the things I've been confused about from the beginning is how you can use these same lines to deliver PG&E power, Sonoma Clean Power, and then within your own system, Super Clean Power and Just OK Power. Help me, like I'm a third grader, understand. Can you go, this house gets this and this house gets that, and then follow-on question is sort of like Mark, what's your position on nuclear? Clean, not clean, renewable?
I love these questions. You're great. So, first of all, high marks on the question. That's exactly the right question. So let me answer 2 different things. The first question. So first one is, if AT&T has some fiber up on a pole, you can have a lot of phone companies delivering service over the same fiber, and it goes house to house, it goes place to place. So there is an analog in internet. And so when Sonic was first starting, they didn't have their own fiber. They actually rented it from Comcast Cable and from AT&T. And they delivered their internet over that fiber. So that's one analog. But a simpler, or maybe a more pointed way to answer that first question is all electrons are the same. If an electron's made by a coal-fired power plant or a wind farm, it's the same electron. Also, electrons don't move. They do this. They wiggle. So all the electrons in the power plant are still in the power plant 20 years later. They move about 2 centimeters on the power plant. They go back and forth. And the way they deliver energy is they push on the next one. They push on the next one. And then your house light bulb is getting pushed on by that. So it's not about the electrons. It's about power plants. So if you pay a clean power plant to operate, you get credit for the pushing it does on the grid. If you pay a dirty power plant, you get credit for the dirty emissions. And so we follow the money. So if we are contracted with and pay a new power plant to get constructed and built and deliver that energy to the grid, then our customers get credit.
If that's 14% converted over tomorrow, where would you get, how long would it take you to be able to create that?
So you're talking about the system power that we buy today, the 10% system power?
Yes, yeah, everybody switched from PG power to SCA power.
So
you guys have to create that much more power all of a sudden.
So the question is really, if the last, so we serve 87% of our territory right now. So if the last 13% suddenly flipped over to Sonoma Clean Power, yes, the immediate way we would handle that on day one is we would go out into the what's called the spot market and buy energy in the market, which would be mostly natural gas. But we would start immediately to fill that with renewable. So within a week or two, we could start buying short-term renewable contracts to supply those customers. And within a year, we have longer-term contracts at a lower price to serve those customers as well. So there are tools and methods for meeting changes in demand that are very rapid, even second to second, not just week to week. So that is a clear map. But really, the weirdest thing about power is the electrons don't move very far. They're just weird. And so it's not about the electrons. It's about the smokestacks. So that's really where it is.
Yeah. 2 questions, if I could, follow up on yours. What are your thoughts, or what is your research telling you about this new generation of smaller nuclear plants? They seem to be populating the Midwest. That's number one. And number two is, I've thought for probably the last 10 years that I don't believe there is a company on this earth that can manage the complexity of what PG&E, I will say, is trying to manage, is not real successful as managing in delivering power to their customers, and yet being able to keep this continuous path they're on, of having to generate more and more and more, given the geographical region and the diversity of the region. I don't think they qualify. It's like, bigger is not better right now.
Are you making a case to break up PG&E?
I'm saying geographical diversity with the group,
Well, let me get back to the nuclear. Sorry, I missed your question, so I'll tag on to this. So there are some new technologies out there that go under the banner of small modular reactors that are really taking off first in Canada. So in the central and eastern provinces of Canada, they're actively constructing 18,000 megawatts of new nuclear power. None of it's completed yet. So actually, none of the small modular reactors are completed. Georgia does have a new traditional light water reactor that just stood up recently. But nuclear power is complicated. It can be done very well, and it can be done very poorly. It can be a source of weapons, and requires a very high degree of safety protection. Has anybody been to Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant? Oh my gosh, this is an incredible room. So did you see that there are both naval and Air Force combat units there that are stationed there all the time to protect the intake valves? The naval units are there. There's anti-aircraft weapons to shoot down planes. It's a no-fly zone. I mean, it's a very high degree of in the US to protect nuclear power. I am cautiously optimistic that small modular reactors have probably solved the meltdown problem. This is what science tells us. We don't have any operational data yet, so we don't know. But the theory following Fukushima was if we make reactors small enough that they can't get thermal runaway, so by having so little thermal mass in the system at one time, that it doesn't escalate when there's a critical process happening. And to rely on gravity rather than backup power for safety. So those are the two really fundamental improvements they made. And so in Fukushima, they had 3 levels of redundant backup power, and they all got overwhelmed by snow. And so they lost all power to withdraw the fuel rods and basically went critical and have a meltdown. And it is still melting down. So Fukushima is not a crisis that is over. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not going to propose any nuclear in California in my career. It's not a starter in California. We don't have the public support for it. Where I think it's going to take off is with data centers. And maybe it should. So as AI grows, companies like OpenAI and Microsoft and Google are very actively exploring it. And the reason is they do need 24/7 power. They need a lot of it. And the alternative is that Texas has just proposed and approved 58,000 megawatts of new natural gas-fired power plants for AI. That's about as much power as California produces today, all told. So the alternative to this is potentially gas. So I'm rooting for nuclear to be successful. I'm not going to say it is yet, because I mean my graduate work was in nuclear accidents. I'm a nuclear engineer. Solar and nuclear was my major. So that's it still concerns me that management of these resources and the waste is still an issue. And so for me, the jury's still out. And PG is to bid, yes. Are we done? Can we wrap? Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. It's great when we can learn about resources that apparently everyone probably in this room is using. And I know I learned a lot about what you guys are working on, so thank you. And how deep your roots are in Sonoma County and our workforce and what we're doing in business today. So thanks for being here. Definitely scan this QR code, I'll leave it up. Check out what they're doing in geothermal. And outside of that, thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for being members. If you're not a member yet, please join us. These conversations are important. It's the only way that we're all informed and making informed decisions on behalf of our community. So thanks for being here. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you on June, gosh, I think it's the 2nd or 3rd. And we've got Supervisor Gore coming. So please mark your calendars, and we'll see you then. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.